Yes, Sundaresh, you're audible.
Awesome. So let's start the session. Yes. Hello and a very warm welcome to all the students present here. I'm Sundaresh Karthik Ganesan from the Student Placement Council, and I will be presenting this session to you this evening. Today's session is being organized by the IIC and is titled Path to IIM, Tracking CAT and Beyond. The session agenda begins with the introduction, and I will continue with the speaker enlightening us on the topic. We will have the Q&A session at the end as time permits. IIMs and IITs are considered as the two eyes of India when it comes to premium education, and the graduates of these institutes are always given the first preference in any job market. Today, we have with us a special guest to guide us through the path to IIM. Karthik sir is a member of the PGP 2023 to 2025 cohort at IIM Ahmedabad and one of the youngest at that. He is a BCom graduate from the Loyola College, which is one of the most well known and reputed colleges in Chennai. He is a recipient of the Erasmus Scholarship to pursue an exchange program to KU Leuven in Belgium in 2022. And most importantly, he is a student of the IITM BS program. With interests in field of business strategy and finance, Sir has internship experiences across multiple sectors, including pharmaceuticals, financial services, and management consulting. And he is also a classically trained vocalist and an ardent debater. We welcome you, sir, and we are very much looking forward to the session.
Hi, thank you, Sundaresh. Um, I hope I'm audible. Anybody still having problems with audio? Good time to let me know
Perfectly
now.
audible, sir.
Awesome. Okay. Thank you for that very, very flattering introduction, I should say. Um, yeah. So, guys, before I start, I just have to say that there's a very high probability that a few of you here in this room are probably older than I am. So, take whatever I say with a pinch of salt. At that, in that same vein, what I'm going to tell you today is basically my experience with the exam. It might be different for a different set of people. Might be different for someone else to talk. But this is my presentation, right? So I have full control over what I want to say to you people, and you kind of have to listen to me over the next 1 hour. So I'll start off maybe with a small introduction about myself. Sundaresh kind of covered everything that there is to be said. But yeah, I graduated from Loyola College in 2023. It's not very far back. I did a BCom over there. I was the batch topper. Um, and then I sort of picked up the BS degree in 2021 when it was first launched. Because I was sort of looking forward to something very interesting to do. Right? I mean, in accounts and commerce specifically, there really isn't so much beyond what you learn in 10th and 12th standard. Of course, it's much more in detail. But I just felt the need to learn something very different. And AI and data science was basically what everyone was talking about at that point in time. I thought, okay, let's just give it a try, and maybe it would be very useful. And it turned out to be quite useful. I think it was a very good point on my CV from that perspective. But I also learned quite a bit, right? And I was able to keep in touch with my math, which a lot of people aren't able to, especially beyond school and engineering, if you've done engineering. So in 2022, I had the opportunity to go on a semester exchange to Belgium. It was my second trip outside of India. That was a very interesting experience, right? Because you grow up in one sort of curriculum, one sort of education system, and then to go and experience something entirely different. That was very good experience. So I think what these three experiences really gave me was a very diverse or a very well ranged sort of profile, and that really was probably one of the reasons I got into the IIMA batch of 2025. There are a lot of people here who are my age, but I am on the slightly younger side of them as well. Nothing too great about it. Management consulting is something that I picked up as an interest after my undergraduate. So I thought maybe I should take a crack at it in the internships, and that's how I ended up at Bain and Company. I had a great problem in the field of retail marketing. I'll tell you guys something more about it if at a later stage, perhaps. But until then, yeah, we should I think go back to presentation. Cool. Just a second. Awesome. So what I'm going to talk to you today is basically going to be about. Sorry. Can you see this? The Fiverr slides changed? Yeah.
Yes,
Okay,
sir.
great. So I'm just going to talk about two things really. One is the exam itself, how you can prepare for the exam, what you can expect on the day of the exam, and finally a little bit about the interview stage, which is what happens after the exam is done. So let's not spend too much time. What I'll be talking to you about is, yeah, great. Cool. So I had a full-time offer with Deloitte, right? In the mid of 2022, I had an internship with Deloitte in audit, and I was extended a full-time offer after that. So there was a bit of a choice, really, right? Should I really work for a couple of years and then go on for the MBA, or should I just give it a shot? And my original plan was to really write CAT in 2024 this year, after spending 2 years in corporate, because that would give me work experience, which is supposed to be very useful in placements here. And the second is obviously who doesn't want a little bit of money to spend. But again, I realize that's probably not what you want to hear at this point in time, right? So let's just go straight into the exams that are there. Broadly, the MBA. Oh, oops, yeah. Yes. Okay, great. So there are three broad exams that are there currently in terms of the large colleges that are there: the CAT, the SAT, and SNAP. Of course, my experience is only limited. You will have each of these colleges that lead to very, very different universities and exams that are there. My experience is primarily only with CAT and SAT. I registered for SNAP, but by the time SNAP was scheduled to happen, I'd already started receiving interview calls from the CAT institutes, the larger IIMs, and XLRI as well. So I didn't really put too much effort into SNAP. I didn't end up giving the exam at the end. So about CAT, the exam is, as you probably know, it's a 2 hour exam. 66 questions, 198 marks, 3 marks for every question. There are three sections. There is one which tests your language capabilities, which is BARC, 24 questions. There's a data interpretation section, which personally I found the hardest because it was not something I had done prior to preparing for CAT. It's about 20 questions. And these come in various configurations. I'll talk to you a little bit about them later. And finally, you have quantitative ability, which is generally about math. No, but the funda is this, right? Why is it so hard? Because there's negative marking, which is probably something you might not have come across that in your IIT exams. I don't remember there being negative marking in IIT exams, as far as I know. But this is the funda. If you get a question wrong, you lose a point. So technically, you could have gotten 3 points, but by getting that one question wrong, you've lost on four, the three that you could have scored and the -1 as well. So you really have to be very careful about deciding which questions to attempt and which questions to, even if you are somewhat sure, maybe it's better to not attempt because there's a negative marking attached to it. That's probably what makes the exam a little difficult. And of course, the first section is VARC. Now, unsurprisingly, there are two sections to VARC. There's VA and there's RC. What is VA and what is RC? VA is basically a test of your grammar, right? Verbal ability. How good is your
No,
okay,
you're
is it
perfectly
just
audible,
for
sir.
Amar? All
It's
right, Amar,
perfectly
you
audible.
should probably rejoin if that's not the problem. Yeah, so verbal ability generally tests your grammar and things like that. You should really think about grammar over there. Some questions you might probably get are a fill in the blank sort of questions where you really fill in with the correct kind of word that's there. And there's other thing which is they give you a bunch of sentences that you have to arrange into a meaningful paragraph and things like that. Those really test your comprehension of English at one level. RCs are reading comprehension passages. There are sort of medium-sized passages about 300, 400 words that you have to read, and there are four questions attached to each passage that are there. There are four such passages normally. These are the broad question types that are there. So, yeah. So there are two kinds of questions in your verbal ability, right? There are the traditional MCQ-based questions, and there's a type your own answer. Type in the answer. That's short for TITA is short for type in the answer. Um, there's a small thing over here that you need to take into account. TITA questions don't have any negative marking. MCQ questions have negative marking. So a lucky guess in TITA might actually give you the 3 marks that you're after without the negative one, the downside of the 1 mark that you might lose. So this is just something that struck me as quite interesting when I was preparing for the exam. There are four RC passages, like I said, four questions each. Normally, two of them are somewhat difficult. Two of them will be a little easier. Pick which ones you want to do. And yeah, I attempted all four of them because I just had fun reading through the paper. I was done with VRC in 25 minutes and I didn't know what to do. So I took a break in the middle of the exam and I came back and do the section. It's there. Great. So how do you prep? Prep strategy is kind of interesting, right? So I don't think there's a real set way to prepare for PARC. By now, all of you would have spent a significant portion of your life with exposure to spoken English. Even I think at IIT, you have those two required courses in English at the beginning of the foundation level that you really need to take part in. Those courses cover everything that you need to. Yeah. The only thing you can do to go above and beyond that is to read the newspaper and other sort of media regularly, because that really improves your vocabulary. A lot of people tend to have problems in vocabulary, and the only way to sort of get ahead of that is by regularly reading or consuming different sources. Movies are also a great way to get to know basic English, of course. But exposure is essentially what I'm driving at. If you want to improve your English, exposure is a great way to start. Personally, I didn't feel the need to prepare very hard for this section because, as I said, by now you've already experienced, you have enough experience with English for a long point in time. But still, some exam funder that helped me out specifically was choose your questions wisely, right? A random guess in a TETA question, like I mentioned earlier, might actually work out for you. So don't shy away from not attempting those TETA questions. Attempt those TETA questions. Be a little more selective in your MCQ questions, because that's where the downside really is. This is a very exam focused, very execution focused point that I would want to say. And if you're entirely if you're not sure about an answer, then it's better that you put that answer in if it was a TETA rather than as an MCQ. This is from VARC's point of view. There is theta is type in the answer. It's type your own answer. There are it's like a fill in the blanks kind of a question, right? I covered that a little bit earlier. So okay, practice. There are enough past papers available freely online. There's a website called 2IIM.com that has every single CAT paper in the last 5 years, last 6 years. If I'm 2016 or 17 is when the record start. I personally found sentence arrangements to be really confusing because I thought the answer was one, but the answer was something else, and it took me some time to really understand why that was the case. Now, a lot of you might also face this problem. So I personally did a lot more questions around sentence arrangement, but mock sets are a great way to practice for VARC. Um, I'll This is something that's very important for you to look at, right? How many questions do you really have to target? My target was do 20 correct answers. That's a guaranteed 99 percentile. 15 is a guaranteed 99 percentile. I think a 45 in VA, and that I ended up with a 99.75 percentile in VA. So that's really the margin. You don't really, this exam is not about attempting every question correct. It's about being better than the others that are out there and doing the exam. And to do that, it's enough if you do 15 to 20 correct answers in VAs. I will take questions about the exam at the end of all three sections. So if you guys have any questions, just save it till the end. Uh, okay, so this is about VA. What about DILR? DILR is a very confusing section for me, right? Because I had a lot of trouble with DI. A lot of people I know also had a lot of trouble with DI because there is really no syllabus for this exam. There are broadly a few question types that you might see, arrangements or tournaments and selections or logic puzzles that are there, but you can't prepare for them in any other way apart from really doing those questions. So the best prep strategy, which is from a friend, by the way, is that you just do as many sets as possible. I just did every single set that was there in the last 5 6 years of stat papers, and I found that was decent enough. There are a few recommended resources you can go through. CrackU has a marathon series, and there are enough online DLR problem sets. You can get Arun Sharma's books free of cost online. So you can just go on LibGen and you can find and find versions of his book also. So you can definitely go and try those out. There's a very long, extensive book where he goes from the most basic DLR problems to the most difficult DLR problems, all sequentially. You can solve all of those. I started very late, so I didn't go through all of those. I just solved the most difficult ones, which I had some trouble, of course, because nobody does that. Right? Why would you start with the most difficult questions? So data management is really the cornerstone of DILR. Every question, the author is called Arun Sharma, and he has a series. He has a series of cat books. He's been doing it for many years right now. He has a book for QA. He has a book for VARC. He has a book for DILR. So you can definitely just take a look at his books. You can find his books or some versions of his books on LibGen, which is an open source book platform that's there for academic research normally. You can find it there, or you can also purchase it offline if you want. So DILR questions are mainly about managing data. There is there's a lot of data that every question will throw at you, and you need to be able to organize that data in some way to make sure that you can really comprehend what's going. I had the most trouble over there because I really didn't know what kind of data to put in what kind of format so that I can understand what's happening and it will help me solve the question. So to do that, I personally couldn't crack it by the end of the year, and the end of the preparation journey. But I found there are certain kinds of questions that will probably have certain kinds of certain kinds of sets that will probably have certain kinds of questions coming up. And the moment you see that it's an arrangement problem, then you're like, huh, okay, the question must be something like this. And having done an arrangement problem earlier, you know how to approach an arrangement problem now. So the best way to sort of go about DRR prep is therefore go through as many sets as possible, and you will actually come across certain techniques of managing data in the way those solutions are structured. And when you go through all of those solutions, you can also come across your own way of presenting data in such a way that it's useful for you. Practice a lot, and really just focus on presenting data first. And you will have this problem, right? Normally there are four sets of five questions each, or in some case earlier they used to be five sets or four questions, but they did some sort of change to that, and you have all kinds of things happening. The focus has to be on arranging your data, get your data together, scan through the questions in a set. Some questions are very, very hard, some questions are very simple. In some sets, the questions aren't even solvable, right? So you should be able to just go through the questions and see if you can think of an answer to that, if you can think of an approach to solve them. If you can't, then just keep them and do some other set. Nobody in DI can do all these sets at all. There are 4 or 5 DILR sets. Do maybe two. That's enough. You don't have to do 20 on 20 questions. You can just do 2 or 3 sets at the end of it. If you're unable to crack at least part of a set, leave that set, go on, do something else. Also, when you're taking mocks, specifically for DILR, just go back and revisit the solution, see where you differed in the way of thinking and where the solution differed in the way of. So really compare your answer, your method of answering versus the paper setter's way of answering, and that's really what you should be able to do. And by the time you're in the last week of CAT, you would have done enough mocks for you to be very clear um, as to where you could have improved, right? So you can just revisit your mock notes to see what really held you back in the first few sessions and where you've improved. So that when you go through that, you really have a good idea on what you are good at. And that will help you very much in terms of DLR. All right. Quantitative is a very good section for all of you here because everybody has gone through enough math in the foundation level. You guys will do much more math in the data science diploma as well, I'm sure. So there's a lot of scope for you guys here in terms of your strengths. Most of your quant topics are covered in either in your school or in your college. You can brush up your concepts. Arun Sharma's book is good enough. It has again structured answers for everything. So there are a few broad sections that are there. These are kind of topics you can expect questions from: numbers, percentages, profit and loss, and so on. These are very basic concepts, right? You would have come across these in maybe 8th standard or 9th standard. By now, you might have even forgotten about these. So a good way to start is to really go revise these basic concepts and then go on to areas like geometry, PNCs, and stuff. For those of you who have taken Math 1 and Math 2, I think you would have definitely taken this into account. You would have done a little bit of work in geometry and permutations and combinations specifically. So this should be easy for you. But the bottom line is really just go through all of these topics before you start attempting mocks of any sort. What I noticed personally was that every question had this one very basic trick that would give you the answer in like 5 seconds or 10 seconds at most. Now, when I started preparing for CAT, I had no idea where to look for where to look for these solutions. You need to start solving questions, and when you start solving questions, you will automatically start seeing patterns in the kind of concepts that they're looking at. And when you start observing the conceptual framework, you really will be able to identify these shortest ways. So what the shortest ways are, you will get. I won't be able to tell you that in geometry you should probably look at circles and properties of circles. I can't tell you at that level. But when you start solving questions, you will see what properties of circles are being used more often in questions. I think that is something that you will only understand for yourself if you start solving papers. So yeah, definitely do that. 12 to 13 correct answers, a guaranteed 99.99% correct, which is again. So if you think about it, right? I said the exam has 66 questions. But I'm saying in VA you answer 15 questions, in DI you answer 10 questions, in QA you answer 10 questions. Effectively, you can get a 99 percentile plus in every single section if you answer half the questions correct. So the exam is not about answering 66 questions. It's about answering correctly. And that is much more important than attempting all questions. This is, keep in mind that CAT is a speed and accuracy game. It is not an attempts game, right? That's just something that you need to be very, very aware of. Good resource is Arun Sharma's books. You can just go through different layers. As I said, he's very clearly structured his book in different difficulty levels. So if you can solve the middle and higher order difficulty levels quite easily, then it would be easy for you, in my opinion. This is a good benchmark. There's about 20, 30 mocks you can do over 2 months. 20, 30 mocks is a lot of mocks. It's a lot of exams. It's basically like writing CAT 20 times. If some imagine how much experience you have at that point in time, right? You have enough and more experience to really go through all of this. Once you give a mock, you'll be able to identify your weak areas. It's the same thing, right? Whenever you give a mock, sit for a while after the mock, see where your answers were different from the answer key. Think about why that answer was different. Think about how you thought through that answer and how the answer key thinks through the answer. The moment you start comparing the two of them, you'll get a very good idea about all of this. All right, and the last thing is there is a mock repository that you should probably create. There's a formula repository that you should definitely create at the end of your preparation, because this is very, very easy for you to just look at the moment before the exam. You have a sheet of paper that's there, and then you just go look through it. Okay, you suddenly forget what's the formula for the volume of a cylinder. That's the situation you want to avoid, right? So just maintain a formula repository for quick revision. Again, like I said in DILR, just go through your mock notes in the last week of last week to CAT, and see where you've improved, identify your strengths, and then attempt the exam in that mindset. All right, I think okay. This is one more thing that I wanted to cover, right? As students at IIT, you definitely have a lot of advantages, in my opinion. The biggest hurdle that anybody normally has is the lack of this mathematical ability. You have practice. The foundation level makes you do enough math. The diploma level makes you do even more. So your mathematical ability is definitely there on point. Try to use that in your answers. You should be, in my opinion, all of you are very well placed in terms of how to solve DILR and QA. And as I said earlier, it's now a speed and accuracy game. It's about getting those answers in time. You will not be take my word in writing. You will not be able to answer 66 questions in those 2 hours. It's impossible. Make it a speed or accuracy game. Answer half the questions, answer them correctly. That's all. This rule of 10 10 10 that you see is something that I personally believe in. It may or may not be true, right? But so far it has worked out. The thing is, every year, a raw score of 90, which is 30 correct answers, right? 30 correct answers, assuming 100% accuracy, absolutely no wrong answers. Score of 90 has historically been enough to hit above 99%, which basically translates to 10 correct answers in every question, in every section. I think that is a very manageable number for anybody. The moment you see that it's a 10 10 10 question, then that really puts you in a very different mental state than saying that I have to attempt 66 questions, I need to get through 3 seconds. No, it's not about that. It's about answering 10 questions correctly. And any of you can do that. Target 100% accuracy, of course, that's best case scenario. But if you feel unsure, or just maybe look for other questions where you can sort of hedge your bets, that even if you get one wrong, you can probably compensate with that. You can compensate for that by getting another question correct. All right. So that is it about the exam. I'll take a little bit of questions about the exam now. So I see some questions about profiles and things like that. We can talk about that later. But about the exam, if any of you have any questions, now is probably the time to raise them. You can put them in the chat box. You can unmute and speak up. All good. Sintesh, if you have any questions, please. Yeah, calculations in DI are too complex. Agreed. How to deal with that? There is no way to deal with that. No? It is, it is. You really need to start solving questions at the beginning. You should think about solving it alongside the answer key, see how they're approaching it, just get into that groove first, and then really start looking at your own preparation, right? Okay, the mock repositories. So my prep was entirely based on past year's papers. I didn't attend any classroom courses or anything like that. I have friends who did all of that. My mocks was basically past year's papers, which I could find on 2IIM. I didn't spend a single rupee on coaching, which is probably some of you might really feel bad about. As I said, I think target score, just don't ask me for something of this level. I maintain that 90%, 90 score is good, right? The BSc is a valid degree, right? Coaching, okay, well, there are a lot of questions that are popping up. Uh,
I will collect them for the answer if you're okay with it.
yeah. Please, that should be great. Which test series to choose? Um, right. So as I said, I didn't really take up any test series. I have friends who did. I heard that IMS's test series is quite good. And apart from that, of course, Career Launcher was quite good. I have a friend of mine who went to iQuanta. iQuanta is also considered to be very good. So these are the three sources that I would recommend. One of them, please don't pick all of them. And at what stage of preparation should we start giving mocks? It's a good question, yeah. I mean, so for me, I started preparing for mocks at least around the end of September. So with about 2 months to go for the exam, right? I think that's a very good timeline to start. Of course, but before that, what I always tell people who ask me for tips about the exam is to, before you really take a decision about coaching or mocks or when to start preparing, go and give the paper. Go look at last year's paper, solve it on a timer, see how much you're able to score. That should give you a good idea of where you stand in terms of the conceptual framework that's needed. If you're not even able to comprehend the question that's there, then you probably need to go back and start from the basics. Then you should probably go to the least difficulty level of Arun Sharma's books and start from there. But if you're able to look through all the questions fairly simply, then you can start giving marks from then on. Right? Don't really have to worry about anything else. So assess your own stage of preparation by giving a past paper first, and just don't do one, right? Because that will give you. If you do well in one, you'll be like, oh, I'm very smart. When you'll start, you might be in for a shock on the day of the exam. Let's try to avoid that as well. So give maybe two or three and see how you stand, and then take a decision about whether you want to take a coaching or you want to prepare only for mocks or anything of that sort. Is coaching really needed? I personally believe it's not necessarily needed. You can you can do it on your own, but that's a decision you should take on your own. I won't tell you what it needs to be. How many months before the exam should we solely start focusing on it? In the sense, okay, so again, is this a question because you're also working side by side, or is it you're also studying for the BS exams? Is it from two academics point of view, or is it from a work point of studying? Okay, in that case, it's fine. Yeah, I mean, look, math is probably the biggest problem for a lot of people, and if you have that down, it shouldn't be a problem. I know enough people who spent about 6 months to do at this point in time. Got it. How much 10th, 12th marks matter? Okay, so 10th, 12th marks are very different. I'll talk about this maybe at the end if I get some time. Are the comprehension questions on the same language style of GMAT? GMAT I've heard is a bit more complicated. Um, it's a little bit more in terms of more involved grammar is what I've heard. This is fine. How much time would you recommend to spend per question? Think about this, right? So for this differs on every section. So essentially, you're looking at section wise. I said in VA, target about 20 correct answers. You have 40 minutes. Spend 2 minutes per question. In BI, I'm saying you answer two sets. You have 40 minutes. Spend 20 minutes per set. That's kind of the number you should be looking at. A good way to do is see 20. If you spend 20 minutes on a DLR set, then you're cutting it close. Even after spending 20 minutes, if you're not able to crack it, you need to have insurance, right? So maybe target a little less than that. Say I'll do one set in 15 minutes and then see where it goes. So take a call on that basis. How many questions am I going to attempt? Therefore, how much time can I allot for every question? Okay, that's how you should think about time allotment. Okay. All right. Cool. I will talk about the interview process now. I think we should take this. There are a lot of questions coming out about profile and other related questions. So I'll talk about that maybe a little bit later. Right. Okay. Once. Okay. So the interview process is slightly different. You will have after you come for the exam, you will get a short list hopefully, and after that you'll be asked to fill out a form, which is basically every single thing you want to be quizzed about, every single thing you want people to know is good about you. That's what you'll put in that form, right? You will put, I was a national winner of a quiz competition in sixth standard. You will say I'm a national sports person. Every single point that you want them to feel like, wow, this guy, I want this guy in my college. That's what you will put in that form. Some forms will also ask you about an essay, like why do you want to do the MBA, or why you want to do it from this particular institute, why this particular program in that institute. For example, IIM Lucknow offers 3 different programs. So if you're applying for one of them, they'll ask you why not apply for the other 2. Those are questions that you really need to think about before applying in the first place, right? So you'll be asked to fill out all of these kind of questions, and then on the day of the interview itself. So they'll call you to a nice fancy hotel. It was an ITC for some institutes, for some other institutes, for some other hotels. Normally good hotels. Yeah, don't worry about that. Um, the there are 2 things that will happen on the day of the interview. One of those will be the written ability test. The other thing is the person interview. The written ability test is a 200, 300 word essay. You will have 10, 20 minutes to write the essay. There's some indicated topics that I got to, that I was asked to write about, whether Atmanirbhar Bharat, whether it's actually a relevant thing, then India in the arms race and things like that. So the structure I adopt for this is, I'll talk a little bit about the structure. But basically, IMA is slightly different. They have what is called analytical writing test, which is slightly different. In a typical WAT exam test, you are basically asked, you're given a one-line prompt. You have to write an essay on the basis of that. In an AWT, you're given a caselet, which is typically a 1.5 page long case, and there'll be a small question at the end of the case, and you have to answer the question on the basis of the information in the case, and also your own learnings as well. So that's a slight difference between what IMA does and what the other institutes do. The structure I typically recommend is, your answer can have 4 paragraphs. Of course, this is my structure, it worked for me. You feel free to agree with it or disagree with it. But I say that your answer should have 4 paragraphs. One introduction, which sets out the context as to what you're going to argue. If it's Atmanirbhar Bharat, my first paragraph will probably be one line about what Atmanirbhar Bharat is and why it came about, some little bit of context over there. Then I'll say arguments for. I'll give 3 points. I'll say, right, see, right now we're all going in a world of globalization, but the moment there is some political turmoil, there really is no insurance that you have as a country that you can sustain yourself. Right? So you need to be able to provide for those exigencies. And that's why you need to have Atmanirbhar Bharat. I'll come up with 2 more points. I'll present those. Then I'll say, why shouldn't you do it? Then I'd say, in a very globalized world, right? If you suddenly start focusing on your own, or you start restricting yourself from international trade, then that has the potential to cut down your international relations. Something like that is what I would say. So you structure your paragraph in this way. You introduce the problem, then you give a few arguments as to why it is a good problem, and then you say, okay, maybe this is not so good. You give some disadvantages, and then you conclude saying, overall, see, I have now given you what the context is. I've told you why it's good. I've told you why it's bad. In the end, I think this is the conclusion. So this is how you should structure. It gives a very structured way. It tells the people that you're thinking in a very structured way, which is, I think, what people are looking for at this stage. Then you have the PI, right? If the PI, a lot of people will tell you that the PI is very predictable. There are certain questions. If anyone says it is predictable, please take them with a pinch of salt. I've had 5 different interviews. There is nothing similar about me. I will not go too much into my interviews per se. You can ask me about that later if you want. But regardless, even if it is not predictable, you still need to prepare. You can't go there saying I'll just bring it regardless of what questions I get asked. These are broadly the areas that you can get asked questions on. You have prior academics, which is especially important if you're a fresher with no full-time work experience, or you have a gap year in your CV, and there's a gap from academics. Then the prior academics is something that will definitely get quizzed on. Then if you're in your work experience, they'll ask you something related to your domain. One of my friends here worked in ad technology, and he was asked extensively about how the technology itself works, what work he did in that technology, and things like that. So be very thorough with your work experience as well. The third one is slightly rarer, where the interviewer really puts you in a situation. Be like, so imagine you're at IIM and you're put into a group. There are 4 members in this group, but none of them really work. You're the only person who has to do all the work. Like, how will you handle this situation? There are questions like that as well. So that is essentially that's just to test how you respond, because this is a conflict situation, right? It's about how you respond to that conflict situation, and they want to test whether you have that little bit of emotional bandwidth to deal with people, to understand why they are not like working with you or something like that. No, this is general knowledge is something I was asked. My IMA interview had a 5 minute rapid fire general knowledge sort of round, which is basically I was asked some 14 questions. I didn't know the answer to 50% of them. But I mean, if I'm sitting here, maybe they thought I knew something. So that's, yeah, general knowledge is something you can get asked, and general knowledge can be either static or dynamic. Static in the sense it's from the past, or dynamic as in what's currently happening, current affairs and things like that. You can get questions from across the board. You can have absolutely random questions. So one of my friends got asked in his IIM Calcutta interview to make a paper airplane, right? So what, where will you bucket? These are absolutely random questions that they just ask for the fun of it. And after coming here, a lot of professors will actually tell you about some of their interview stories and what a candidate did when he was asked to do something like that. So these random questions are typically when the professor wants to have a little bit of fun, right, with with the interviewee, and that can be very stressful, because imagine if someone asks you to make a paper airplane and you just forget what to do. Right? It's very possible. So there are very random questions, but slightly rarer also. You might not get such random questions. But the first four are where you can really expect a lot of questions to come from. I personally had a stress interview for IMA. I was bombarded with questions around a variety of topics. Like I said, I had a rapid fire GK. I was asked calculus, which as a non-engineer is probably not something I expected to be asked on, but I was still asked for my application of calculus, which thankfully I had devised at IIT. So I was able to give some sort of an answer to them, and they were satisfied. Finance is something that any non-engineer can expect questions on. So you really have to have some answer to that. It's okay to not have an answer. And as I said in the GK, the rapid fire, I answered maybe 40% of the question. Everything else, I was just saying, I don't know. Maybe it's this, maybe it's not. So things like that, you can definitely, it's fine if you don't know the answer, but just be very upfront about it, or just say, see, I don't know the answer. But if I were to take a guess, I think this should be the answer. That's a good way to handle it, right? And some people have this habit of saying, I'll get back to you. I mean, there is absolutely no way you'll be able to get back to the professor. You have no idea who the professor is at the point in time, right? So that's probably not a good way to say. If you don't know the answer, say, I don't know it, but I'd be willing to learn. Maybe you can tell me about it. Or I don't know, but I think this should be the answer. Give your reasoning and say, this is what I think the answer will be. So in general, trips is basically stay very calm. They are trying to stress you out. They are designed to sort of push and prod at you to see how you respond to stress. If you stay calm, then you basically cleared the interview in that sense. Be very clear in your articulation. Be very composed. Be structured in your arguments. You might be asked to make an argument. For example, in the situation-based question, you might be asked to debate on either side. You'd be asked to imagine you're on the other side. How would you tell your friend that you don't want to work? So you should be able to structure your arguments in such a way that it makes sense. Be very structured. If you're a fresher, be very thorough with your academics. I was asked a lot of questions and a lot of interviews about accounting standards, because that's what a BCom is really meant to know, right? It's always good to show a well-rounded profile in terms of extracurriculars as well as academics. If you have work experience, then of course that's better. Every IIM has a small proportion in terms of their the profile scoring for professional experience. So that's always good to have. Mock interviews are great. I had a lot of learnings from that. Practice with friends. If you're preparing for CAT along with a few other people, then get them on call, ask them to interview you. Then you will find enough accounts of mock interviews online. So ask them to maybe read up on those and take a mock interview of you. You take a mock interview for a few of them so that you understand how it is to be in that position as a professor, asking those questions, right? Some B schools will assign you mentors. IIM Lucknow gave me a great mentor. I had learned a lot from that guy. Make good use of them, talk to them, understand how the process was for them. And really, yeah, that's probably how you should go about preparing for the interview process. The bottom line here is, see, the exam is meant as a rejection mechanism. I'll be very clear about this because, see, there are 3 lakh people writing the exam. There are about 3,000 seats at the IIMs. You need a way to cut through a lot of people, and that's what the exam is for. The interview, on the other hand, is a selection mechanism. Now, from the 3 lakh people, they've identified about 10,000 people. And in those 10,000 people, they now have to give seats to 3,000 people. Now, it's a very different scenario than the exam, right? So just stay calm, give it your best shot, and it's more likely than not that you might actually get through and make it to the admission decision. All right. So that was about the end of my presentation. I hope I've covered enough that that all of you have some takeaways from this session. I like to call it the cat and mouse game because we were all in the rat race, and the cat is really out there to get you. Yeah, thank you for listening. Thank you to Sanjay and Sundaresh for organizing the session. I had a lot of fun. Thank you, Afreen, as well. We should, yeah, open for questions at this point in time, as promised, Q&A. Let's have people putting up hands and asking questions if that works.
Yes, sir. And I think before that, we have a question in the chat from Ayush
Yeah,
Mittal. How to
yeah,
handle interview questions regarding doing two unrelated degrees together?
yeah. Okay, this is about, so for me, I think the BCom and BSc were two different unrelated degrees, right? The way I went about answering that is to say that, see, the BCom gives you one set of skills. The BSc gives an entirely different set of skills that you would otherwise not even be exposed to as a BCom grad, right? So for me, it is not about doing two unrelated degrees. It's about getting two skill sets, and you need both of those skill sets to be able to do well in a corporate career anyway. So I positioned it in terms of acquiring skills. I think that really worked out for me. They were quite impressed with the answer as well. They were like, okay, this is makes sense to a certain extent. And then they asked me why data science. Said, see, data science is kind of what everybody is going into. And if I really step into to corporate or a workplace scenario or even an academic scenario where everybody else knows what it is and I don't know what it is, and I'm at a disadvantage, right? So it's a gap in my education that I really need to plug. That's why I picked. That's how I would answer.
Yes, sir. That was a
Okay.
wonderful answer. And
Okay.
I think there is one other question by Akshit Mittal about the profile that has been waiting for too long. I am a standalone student at IT Madras BS degree. What else should I
Yeah.
do to improve my profile for better chances of selection in IIM?
Okay. See, every institute has its own profile scoring metrics, right? So at IMA, the way they do it is you have a quota for the profile score. Some 40% of your score comes from the profile itself. And the profile score is further broken down into different levels. You have, for example, 10% weightage to your 10 standard, 10% to your 12 standard. So these percentages keep changing, right? Um, this is very different. It might be very different now. When I attempted, it was 10% for 10 standard, 10% for 12 standard, 10% for college, and 5% for work experience. So there are different aspects like this in terms of profile itself. Now, this is a very objective scoring mechanism. This is more in terms of creating that shortlist value. Now, from there, after that is done, you really need to think about building a profile that stands out. And the way you can do that is to show that you've really worked towards improving yourself in terms of skill sets. So for me, what really stood out was, see, I am a 21-year-old guy, 20-year-old guy when I was applying for CAT at least. Now I've done a BCom, I've done a BS, I started a BS. Now I've done internships in different industries. I went on exchange. So, and I'm a singer, I'm a debater. So the perception that such a profile normally generates is, okay, this guy has done a very diverse set of activities. So as a fresher, that is something that you can definitely work towards. On the other hand, if you're someone with work experience, what you can do is to look at the depth of work experience. How much of an expert are you in that particular field? Now, that is also something that is very useful to think about. You have so there's two ways you can think about it essentially. One is increase the width, the breadth of your experiences, or improve the depth of your experience. You can do either of them. Now, the two of them have different values for different groups of people. For a fresher, it's probably easier to think about breadth. For someone with work experience, it's probably better to think about depth. I hope that gives you an answer to the question.
Yes, sir, that was a wonderful answer. And we have another question from Zainab Khan. I'm a distance education student who completed BBA this year with zero work experience. Is it a good idea to go for CAT right now?
As far as I know, the degree, the exam doesn't discriminate between people who have done distance education or people who have done on-campus education. Right? It's not there is no such discrimination as far as I know. So yeah, you can definitely take an attempt, but if you feel that you might be perhaps better relied on, you would be better posed to take experience, you should definitely do that. So some observations maybe this batch at IME I've heard has some has much more work experience on average than earlier. So if that is something you want to go by, then maybe yes, you can consider getting a year or so of work experience. Okay.
Yes, sir. Thank you. And sir, a lot of questions revolve around the fact about the weightage given to the academics of school and the college's curriculum. So just is
Mhm.
wondering about, will they have an adverse effect in their selection if they have slightly less marks in their school or college, like 60 to 70%?
So the way it normally works is right. I don't know about all of these colleges specifically, but by and large, there's a tier-based system for scoring, and the tier-based system basically works like this. So if you've scored more than 90%, you get 10 on 10. 80% you get 8 on 10, 70% you get 7 on 10, and something like that. That's how the scoring works. Now, for IIM Indore, if I'm not wrong, they have a percentile-based system where they convert your 10th and 12th standard into a percentile rank for that year. They have data that goes back to different years, and they really they generate a percentile score, and that percentile score is what determines the weightage. So yes, there is weightage. Your academics in total have about 20 to 30% weightage in terms of the profile scoring. It is possible that someone who has slightly lower academics faces a bit of a disadvantage, but you can definitely pull that back up through work experience or a very high catch. So it's not impossible to work against it, but yes, it might be a little bit against you against your field.
Yes, sir. And another question that was actually slightly answered by your presentation earlier, that a
Mhm.
student has a 3-year gap in his academics because of some personal issues. So,
Yeah,
how does it affect his selection?
it doesn't. So the thing is, if you can explain your gap year well, then it's fine. Some of you may choose to explain that gap year through, let's say, I did a project of some sort, or maybe it was because you were injured and you couldn't do anything about it. You had some sort of disease or anything of that sort. You can definitely have different ways of answering that. You can the way I would answer that, I didn't have to, but I've had friends who've answered that in terms of other things that they've done on the side. Maybe they spent a year pursuing an interest or so. So that's probably the way you would go about answering. But yeah, as far as you can answer it convincingly, it shouldn't be a
Yes, sir. And there is another question from Chinmaya Pradhan. In
problem.
current scenario, is it advisable to pursue MBA from IIM with work experience or as a fresher? Which category of students stand a better chance in campus placement?
All right. So campus placement is not something I'm actually allowed to talk about. Uh, it's confidential entirely.
Yes, sir.
Um, But so the thing is, there are very different kinds of roles. Some roles, typically finance roles, it might be good to have some amount of work experience, some amount of relevant work experience. Right. So the thing is, work experience doesn't mean you get 2 years of work experience in any sort of organization. Right. It should be towards a particular role. If you're interested in marketing, then 6 months of marketing experience or sales experience will be much better than 2 years of audit experience. Or if you want to get into investment banking or something of the finance sort of role, then 6 months as an intern in a finance firm is definitely more impactful than 2 years doing sales. So the better question to ask is, should I do should I do an MBA right now with relevant work experience or as a fresher? Take that call. Right? Think about work experience not in terms of absolute quantity, but in terms of quality.
Yes, sir. And a major question that is asked by some other group of students is what will be the ideal percentile for IIM Blackie, as in all the IIMs, because they are concerned about how high the selection bar would be for them
Understood.
to par.
Yeah, yeah. So see, guys, there's obviously a little bit of academic stream data also, right? That's there. Someone who's done arts or commerce can probably get through with a slightly lower percentile than an engineer. The system is designed in such a way that they want to incentivize people who are not from engineering backgrounds to also pursue an MBA. Now, you may agree or disagree with that policy, but the policy is there, so you have to deal with it. As an engineer, I am hearing that it's getting much more difficult to really crack the top rounds. I have heard of people with one of my friends had a 99.91 um, percentile recently, and he didn't get the call from IIM Bangalore. Somebody had the call from Ahmedabad, Calcutta, no, not Calcutta, Ahmedabad, Lucknow, Kozhikode, Indore, and a few others. Um, the general understanding is that if you want to get an interview call from IIM Calcutta, you need to have a 99.7 plus or something like that. IIM Bangalore selection criteria is slightly more different. They normally have much more weightage for um, your DI scores, DRR scores, and work experience. They tend to prioritize people with higher work experience. IIM Ahmedabad is known to be slightly more relaxed in that sense. So the criteria really depend on different institutes. You may end up with a really good percentile in CAT and still not really be able to get any of those good calls. Or you may end up with a slightly lower percentile and still be able to get calls. A lot of it's a very it's a black box at the end of the day. I would say, regardless of whatever you know, whatever mechanisms have been put in place. Sometimes it's difficult to say. Yeah.
Yes, sir. And there is another question by Ritika Bhate. How is the
Hmm.
interview for engineering background candidates? It's very specific.
Okay. I can't answer this from my personal experience, but from the friends that I've spoken to, a lot of them were asked on a lot of them were really asked about laws of thermodynamics and things like that, very academic oriented things like that. Some of them are also asked about why don't you go for a master's in technology? Why not do an MTech? Why not do something else rather? That's also something that a lot of them were asked. Most engineers were also asked about their work experience. I think that's also something a lot of them were asked about. Yeah, broadly that's what I would
Yes,
say.
sir.
But you can
Yes,
expand
sir.
you can expect your answers, your questions to be around work experience, academics in very much detail. A lot of them also ask questions about very basic math. So yeah, what I would say.
Yes, sir. And another question by Yash. How to make a good team for case competitions as a non-MBA students? Like, who do we have to approach?
Right. So the way we go about case competition preparation is basically, see, it all starts with friends, right? You need to find friends who are sort of interested in the same things that you are. I spoke to a few people. The first few people I met when I came to IIM are still the people I do case competitions with, right? So you can think about it from that. Find a group of friends who are very, similar to you in terms of um, similar to you in terms of what they want to do. That's a good place to start. And as you start doing more and more case comps, that group will automatically start becoming smaller and smaller, and more people will come in. It's a process that happens on its own. I think it's easier in an MBA context because you're all on the same campus. Typically, everybody's doing the same things. You meet a few people doing this competition or that competition. Then you start thinking, okay, that person did this competition. Maybe I should ask them for the next competition. So you can also take a more active role in that case. So just start off with friends, and then if it goes well, then you continue with it. Or if you see someone else who's probably doing better, and you want to sort of partner up with them, you need to take the initiative, right? You need to go and ask them what needs to be done. But yeah, friends are a good place to start.
Yes, sir. And I think we have reached the end of the session as well.
Okay,
Sir,
great.
that was the most wonderful session that I have ever attended for CAT preparation as a MBA aspirant. And it was
Oh
very
yeah.
And it was a very comprehensive journey that you took us on. It was very informative and enlightening, and it gave me a clarity of what I'm preparing for and what I should be doing. And I found it very relieving when you showed the positive correlation between our curriculum and the CATS syllabus. And it was very motivating to know that we have an academic edge over answering certain sections of the exam. Thank you, sir, for this wonderful session. I'm sure all the students got a very clear picture of what they have to do to prepare. Thank you, sir. Thank you. It was a very wonderful session, sir.
Thank you, guys. Thank you for listening. I'm hearing requests for the PDF. I will talk to Sundaresh and
Yes, sir.
we will see what can be done on